Having surpassed 1,000 completed anime, it's time to review my old favorites and find out what holds up. I'm Sacrabolic, your envoy of hope, and this is Anime Favorite Search. The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya 2 is split into 3 arcs, the first of which is only a single episode but has massive implications for the rest of the series, which I won't actually get into because I don't have the most to say about it, and I'll also address it a little bit more later. The second arc, I broke a long-standing promise to myself because I rewatched The Endless Eight. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with The Endless Eight, which I guess is possible considering it's been quite a long time since Season 2 aired, and I guess Haruhi's not really in the discourse anymore, was a series of 8 episodes in the second season that are all functionally the exact same episode. So basically, in the show, it comes to summer vacation, and then Haruhi plans a big series of events for all of the main characters to do so that they have an outrageously fun summer vacation. And it is actually a pretty fun summer vacation because even Kyon, with his pessimistic ass, admits that it was a good time and he had a blast that summer. So what ends up happening is that Haruhi locks them in a time loop, and this time loop lasts for 8 episodes. Real time, 8 episodes, where the events of the episode, with one exception, are basically the same thing for all 8 episodes. And at the end of every episode, you basically have Kyon being like, well, I guess time's gonna reset, and then the next episode, it starts the whole thing over and over again. You might think this was KyoAni being lazy, but the most baffling thing about the decision to do Endless Eight as a full 8 episodes is that they clearly reanimated every single episode. The characters' outfits changed, the camera angles changed, the scenery changes. They, actually reanimated every single aspect of the show. When I watched Endless Eight the first time, I was bored out of my fucking mind. I cannot tell you how boring I found Endless Eight the first time around, to the point where I, like I said, promised I would never watch it ever again. Rewatching Endless Eight, I noticed that I did know, obviously, that there were differences, but Endless Eight sort of shows, as it goes on, as you go further in the episodes, you start to notice more things that are going wrong in the episode. It's almost as if, reality is breaking as it's going. Because the first time through is literally the first time. They had no idea of the time loop. And then they know about the time loop in the second episode, and they have a meeting about the time loop, which occurs for over 500, nearly 600 years. Essentially, they're locked in this time loop, so thank God you don't have to deal with it real time. The one character that remembers each and every loop is Yuki, who says that different events happen in different loops sometimes things are different, but it really does seem from these episodes, unless I'm completely missing something, that except for Yuki's actions or the feelings of deja vu that happen to the characters, it seems like they do all of the same things. So I wish, were they to reanimate every episode of Endless Eight, I actually wish we actually would have gotten to see them switch up some of the events. I think that could have added some fun and taken away some of the boring and monotonous bite to it. I think the reason they didn't do this is because, in a way, Endless Eight is designed to be viewed, even though all of Haruhi is viewed from this perspective of Kyon. I think that, and the fact that you clearly see little breaks in reality, like skips of animation, the characters zooming in and the screen going all staticky, and then sometimes segments will play over and over again, and it gets worse as the episodes go on. Episode 7 and 8 is fucking bonkers of how hard everything is breaking. And I think it's supposed to be indicative of Yuki's mental state breaking as she's trapped in the same time loop for 600 years, literally incapable of doing anything to stop the time loop. And this leads really well into Disappearance, where Yuki is absolutely fucking snapped. And the Yuki that had to deal with the time loop of Endless Eight really is a different character than the Yuki that didn't have to deal with the time loop. Because post Endless Eight, Yuki's mental state starts to get more and more unhinged, which culminates in Disappearance, which we will talk about, I guess, probably in 2 weeks, is I think what the schedule says. I will have to say I have more of an appreciation for Endless Eight now that I'm way older. God, has it been 10 years? Oh my God, it's been over 10 years. Holy shit. Anyway, oh my God, it's been like 15 years. Okay, so anyway, now that 15 years have passed, oh my fucking God, I feel old. I have more of an appreciation for Endless Eight in what it is trying to show, sort of narratively and thematically. Do I think it could have been told better? Would have I loved to them to sort of mix up the events like Yuki claims to have happened? Absolutely. And do I think that spending 8 episodes of a limited 14-episode season was absolutely worth it? No, honestly, if Endless Eight had been cut down and they were able to fill in a few more arcs, I don't know if they had room for them, but if there were other arcs or some sort of like omakes or some shit to like throw in there, I would have preferred that, honestly. It does feel like, to this day, a lot of wasted space, especially because we never ended up getting that season 3 of Haruhi. But anyway, the third arc brings us into the filming of the movie that starts off with episode 0/episode 11 of the original first season. We get to see how this movie is produced. And this is basically Haruhi at her absolute worst and most insufferable. To be fair, part of this is spurred on by the fact that Kyon is especially grouchy for a good bulk of the arc, and it does seem like it's sort of feeding into Haruhi's sort of more aggressive tendencies, and it is definitely not aided by the fact that he's also very fussy over Asahina during that arc, which of course makes Haruhi jealous, which makes Haruhi's behavior increase in how bad it is, which makes Kyon fuss more over Asahina, and it turns into this huge cycle that, like, blows up in a fucking gender equality moment where he almost fucking decks Haruhi. It's a very dramatic scene, and I will have to say that really, I don't, looking back at this, rewatching it, I don't think Kyon is in the right for the entirety of the arc. I do think he sort of drags down the mood, but I think this becomes more necessary as Haruhi's insanity and delusion starts spiraling to the point where reality starts breaking constantly in every scene of the movie. And I do think there is a point where she definitely goes too far. Like, Kyon, I think, is almost certainly in the right, maybe a little too aggro, when she just starts beating Asahina for not shooting lasers out of her eyes, which is a thing she doesn't think people can do, to be clear. And when she, like, gets Asahina fucking drunk so that she can make out with Itsuki for filming the movie. Like, Kyon getting pissed off about what is basically drugging and beating a girl was completely justified. And this really is the moment where, like, Haruhi is sort of, she goes, like, full villain during this arc. And I think it's sort of interesting that season 2 shows us 2 different sides of Haruhi. Because although she is the primary issue in the Endless Eight arc, it is worth noting that in Endless Eight, this is actually Haruhi at her least insufferable. This is the moment where even Kyon has to admit he is having a blast with Haruhi's antics. It's less Haruhi breaking reality intentionally in this rate, and more Haruhi just having fun with her friends like a normal high school girl. It is basically her at her most normal, which I think is contrasted really well in the immediate following arc, which is where she goes absolutely insane, makes a cat talk, starts firing lasers out of people's eyes, makes it start sprouting cherry blossoms in the wrong season, fucking turns a bunch of pigeons into doves. Like, she starts shattering reality with her fucking delusions in it. And it's a really good contrast from the initial first arc. And I think setting this up with the original arc, with Bamboo Leaf Rhapsody, where we understand more of Haruhi's motivations and see her connection to Kyon, I think there's a lot to be said that's going on in season 2. And crazy enough, I actually like it better watching it now, like 15 years later, than when I watched it the first time. And a large part of that is because I don't find Endless Eight as boring as I used to. But one other thing that really got me and really won me over is sort of the last episode of this, where Itsuki confides in Kyon that he believes that Asahina is actually manipulating him with her sort of like doughy-eyed, clumsy girl crybaby routine. And how there's a bunch of groups, not just the 3 that Kyon's used to dealing with, who are all vying for Haruhi and basically trying to get a handle on her situation. Like, there's like actual bloodshed and battles that are being kept away, and how Kyon is a top prize on all sides. And Itsuki posits the idea that Kyon is in fact being manipulated by Asahina. He does that, oh, I'm joking kind of thing, and Kyon's like, shut up kind of thing. But you get the idea that maybe Itsuki is not joking. Now, granted, I don't think Asahina herself, I don't think her younger version is necessarily intentionally manipulating Kyon. I think her persona is very real. I do think she is the sort of doughy-eyed, clumsy crybaby that she presents herself to be. But I think she was chosen for her personality to manipulate Kyon because they knew that that personality would have an effect on him. And if I had to guess who set this up, and I do think there's some manipulation going on under people's orders, but I think her persona itself is real. I don't think it's like what Itsuki suggests, where her persona itself is false. I think her persona is very real. Who I think is causing this manipulation is the future Mikuru Asahina from the future, who we have seen has so much more confidence and is so much more manipulative than her younger version, even going so far as to manipulate her own younger version, who we know, or at least we can infer, that the young Asahina is actually an inferior in reports to her older self. So do I think that older adult Asahina has sent her younger self to manipulate Kyon? I actually do, and I'm sort of going with Itsuki on this. I think he makes a good point. And this one little scene that's almost a sort of throw-off, but also builds on everything we've seen throughout the course of the series. For one, it acts as a perfect capstone, right? Because this talk about manipulation is contrasted from Bamboo Leaf Rhapsody, where we do see some of the manipulations of the older Asahina. And so I think, one, the show does a great job of sort of capping itself off with the final episode versus the first episode, but does a great job of contrasting the two large arcs of filming the movie and the Endless Eight with each other. And so, crazy enough, season 2 ends up having an actually pretty well thought out and fantastic narrative structure. And this is the exact kind of thing that I fucking love about Haruhi. Because I have been, honestly, for years, almost misremembering Haruhi as just being a silly romance comedy where the main heroine was God. But no, digging into it, there really is just so much depth that I forgot about and so many things to theorize. I'm still not unconvinced that Kyon isn't secretly God and everyone's gaslighting him into thinking it's Haruhi. I'm absolutely not convinced about this at all. But anyway, the point is that even years later, divorced from the original season 1 and season 2, The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya is still a fantastic anime. And still probably to this day, one of the greatest I've ever seen. Twitch and Discord in the description. I've been Sacrobolic, your envoy of hope. Bye-bye.